Good evening, Hillbrook Asylum. The doctor is in. Sorry I can't stay and chat, but I've a recording to edit and an artery to sew up. Oh, don't worry, it's not mine. Patient 744 has been acting up again. Haven't you, 744? Charming, isn't she? I just adore her, as I do all of the patients I treat here. Oh, I know they're all technically yours, Dr. Wickman, but I can't help myself. As a full-time member of your institution, I feel an everlasting bond with my brothers and sisters here. Patient 744, my dear Fantasy. Francis Ducard, the favored among our security personnel here at the asylum. Let's take out that gag. Say hello, Francis.
When I get out of here, I'll carve your face off.
And in goes the muzzle. Adorable, isn't he, Wickman? You should know you hired him. I know you made me promise. Cease the deceasing of members of staff or no more shock therapy. Ooh, I do get a charge out of our sessions, but this is one patient I just couldn't let go. But before I go on, allow me to explain the being that is my dear sweet Fantasy. We've had many an odd boarder here at our luxury asylum over the years, and as many of our long-term psychiatrists will confess, not all of our patients leave after their treatments come to a permanent close. One Miss Kessler, our posthumous patient 216, has traded many a word with me over the years, and I find her wisdom on our upcoming apocalypse quite enlightening. The dead, though long deceased, have always found ways to pass on little tidbits. Their knowledge becomes our own, and today I'm going to share a bit of that know-all with the class. Fantasy came here not too long ago. Before Hillbrook, we had very little to do with one another. Back then, Fantasy was friends with someone who never really existed. At least not according to one Francis Ducard. Wait, no, that's not... Surely that isn't true, Francis. That can't be your signature. Signing away this girl at the tender age of... What does it say? 8 years old. Whose one claim to madness was claiming that you, a respected husband and father of 2, could ever be accused of fathering a wee lass with a local whore. What a scandal that would be. For a man of your inadequate intelligence, you did well covering the trail. When your mistress of the night met with an unforeseen accident 3 times in a row, your little baby did the only thing she knew to do. Go to the police and ask for Daddy. Must have been shocking, Ducard. The sins of the past coming home to roost. Getting that phone call late at night, nestled next to the missus on the couch, the little one sleeping away upstairs, and your whole world of glass ready to shatter. But you were a quick thinker, weren't you, Ducard? You knew of a pal or two, both of whom owed you a favor, and you knew exactly where to hide an illegitimate you never wanted found. Shadow Mountain. Oh, we all know of Shadow Mountain. Even the hardened psychotics here squirm when forced to think of those lifeless holes. The sign outside that asylum's walls speak of the mountain as a nurturing center of creativity and learning, surrounded by beautiful gardens and artistic statues built of loving mortar, brick, and stones that gives the manor a Baroque design straight out of a Renaissance hell. I've always found Hillbrook to be built in much better taste, don't you? Did you know what became of your little girl within the mountain, Ducard? Would you have cared if you did? I want you to understand why you are here, dear friend. When you enrolled your little one to her new boarding school, records say you never visited again. No one did. As far as the legal documents knew, your child was but a figment of the world, like God or capable politicians. Into the mountain's belly she went, down into the hold where dreams go to die. Cut and snip went skin and tendons, crunch and snap those pesky bones. How much does it hurt, my sweet, if I stick this scalpel all the way through here? Shh. There, just a prick. Imagine feeling that all over your body at least 10 times a day. I mean, I've gone through extremes in my time. Don't get me started. I won't stop. But despite what the justice system stated, there's always been a method to my madness, a sanity to my zany. I tortured only when I knew the cure was just in sight. Not true for the mountain. Their operational practices were extreme even by my standards. But despite those surgeons' best endeavors, your offspring persevered despite the pain. She allowed the saws to keep buzzing, swallowed the pills she never stopped popping. 2 years passed so slowly. 2 years. That would make her 10 when she first met our lovely Fantasy. Fantasy says she had always been a tenant of the mountain. She doesn't remember anything else. When the two ladies first met, everything blurred together. Considering how many lobotomies are performed on a daily basis at Shadow Mountain, it's not all that surprising. Do you know how the Egyptians performed their lobotomies, Ducard? They'd take a hook and silver pick, stick them straight up the nasal, and scoop out the gray cells, piece by piece. Magicians and miracle workers, that lot. I don't have a hook handy, I'm afraid, but I'm sure we'll make do. Fantasy was a friend through and through for your Princess Ducard. Fantasy, the giggling fool, the mind phantom, light of the mountain. Ah, what better way to keep the kiddie's mind off of the life-altering torments than by making merry fun and whimsy? Fantasy would dance and tumble and sing and joke. Oh, the whippersnappers ate it up. Even made a song about her. How did it go? Sing, laugh, and smile for Fantasy's loving lot. Take away her loving darlings, and she'll see you to hell and rot. Oh, kind of catchy, I think. Your daughter was one of those darlings, Ducard. She was Fantasy's favorite one. Her first one. Fantasy is a lady of many talents. Did you know she can influence the mind? Oh, I mean, given enough time, I can pressure patients to extremes. But those extremes have to be there to begin with. Otherwise, my words are mere blabber. Not for Fantasy. She used her powers to make her wards forget the agony, to make them believe the steroid trank pills and lice water were M&Ms and soda pop, to make the kiddies believe Fantasy was a happy, singing clown with the voice of angels instead of whatever Shadow Mountain has transfigured you into, my darling. Oh, I can't even describe you. You say a look upon your visage is enough to snap the mind, tear back the delusions of reality, and send the very sanity of humanity into oblivion. I wouldn't know. I sent my sanity away long ago. To me, you have the face of a celestial. Beautiful. Was Fantasy's powers always waiting inside, held back by willpower and unleashed by trauma? Or was this the design of Shadow Mountain? Super-powered children manufactured to let loose chaos in their wake? The pills they all downed did more than influence apathy and subservience. If she knows, Fantasy isn't talking. Despite telling of the mountain's existence, of her time spent there, she is unusually silent. Isn't that right, my lovely? No, isn't she saucy? Fantasy used to have such a wondrous imagination. Until the day your daughter was taken to the chamber. The chamber, Ducard. The final stop on every Munchkin's journey within the mountain. Graduation day, the doctors called it. No, it's not a test. No multiple choice here. No need to pick thy brain. The doctors are there to pick it for you. Did you know that a drill syringe is required for this 2-hour operation, Francis? What is a drill syringe, you might ask? Well, it looks like this. Yes, quite barbaric, isn't it? I can't believe I've operated so long without one of these babies. Lovely. The drill syringe is a necessity for the surgery, Ducard. Strong enough to pierce through the skull and light enough to penetrate the brain without rupturing it. Terrifyingly efficient, though a tad messy. A nurse must be on hand always with a sponge to mop up any fluid that pumps freely, blood or cerebral. When the final operation for your daughter was ready, Francis, she was rolled into the theater on a gurney. She couldn't walk at that point, I'm afraid. Without life support, she could barely piss. She'd just lie there with only that withering gasp and that heaving chest to prove that those lungs of hers were still working. Those milky white eyes strained to take in the faces looking down at her, like a pig looking up at the butcher's. Surgeon masks and caps hid the features of everyone in the room. I'm not sure the little one would have recognized anyone anyway. New doctors were brought in routinely to perform more surgeries, pulling something out or putting something in. Doing what they could to change the girl's anatomy. Into what? Only the mountain knows. But it wasn't the doctor she was trying to locate, Francis. It was you, her family, the father she always wanted, the stepmother she didn't know, the half-sibling she'd never have. Her long-dead mummy, waiting to give out that last loving embrace. No familiar faces, no tender kisses, just the scrubs and the clown. Fantasy had come to see her little one's big day, a smiley balloon in one hand and a hastily scribbled card in the other. It was hard to read, especially for the little darling. Her eyes never quite recovered after being removed and replaced. But she could just make out the childish scratch her friend had written. Love you always. Fantasy smiled across the chamber, unnoticed as always by the doctors and nurses on staff. I'll bet your daughter wondered about that. How the adults that occupied the mountain seemed oblivious to the cartoonist figure painted white and topped with that bright bush of brilliant-colored hair, yellows, pinks, and blues. Why did they seem so able to ignore the laughing stranger, tip-tapping in those mile-long shoes? Couldn't they hear the singing of that never-ending tune? Oh, Fantasy still had that happy smile upon her face, beaming bright enough to light the room. In response, the poor shriveled creature, too soon on the slab, gave a curve on her lip. It was the closest thing to a smile your baby could give, Francis. And it was the last. Drill syringes can be unpractical devices. Did a piece of bone snap off the cranium and embed itself into the girl's gooey center? Perhaps years of medical and surgical abuse finally took its toll. Death by shock at having a rotating piece of steel eating through her head? Means to an end matter little if the end means death. Little baby Ducard's heart stopped as soon as the drill struck oil. The heart monitor ceased its beating. The spill poured like a crimson river. The serum continued its injection into the child's cold, dying brain, unabated, spilling some of its mystery contents along with the warm blood now trailing the corpse's pale, peeling flesh. And Fantasy finally stopped her singing. No laughter, not even a giggle. It wasn't funny. Not anymore. A survivor, despite being half vivisected, talked of the clown that came from nowhere. Strange. Clowns were not normally allowed in the operating room, and they were certainly not allowed access to the medical equipment, such as the surgical saw now buzzing in her hands. The light of the mountain smiled wide, without mirth and with no whimsy. She laughed with no joy and with no life. Graduation came for everyone in Shadow Mountain. What happened afterwards? Well, the two CEOs that owned the asylum, unofficially, naturally covered up everything. The Shadow Mountain Massacre, as they called it. The headlines spoke of the nameless patient who murdered the poor doctors that gave their lives to protect the young patients. The tykes that escaped tried to tell the world of their time at the mountain. They were silenced in one way or another. Many have found a refuge here at Hillbrook, including Fantasy herself. Of course, it was natural for her to come. There's still one last string to sever. Isn't that right, Francis? Oh, come now, don't be modest. Sure, it was the mountain that altered your bastard child. But you played a role as well. You punched your own daughter's ticket to hell and left her to die. Die she did, Francis. Nothing can make Fantasy forget that. Bring in the clowns. Oh, I'm afraid Fantasy's abilities over the mind doesn't extend beyond the radio, ladies and gentlemen. Just use your imagination and play along. Look at the doctors and nurses prepping for surgery. Hear the sharpening of their tools. Nurse, get the razor ready. If we're going to get through that thick skull, Francis needs a haircut. Get the pliers, my friends. Those bones got to go. Fantasy, you know what to do. Oh, no tears, please, Francis. I've been told it's a waste of good suffering. Whoop! I do love good surgery, but my work is done. Fantasy is close to full closure, and Francis's mangled body will surely heal what wounds remain. Or not. Psychology can be an unpractical science. Have fun, darlings. Oh, I could kill for a good shock therapy.